Welcome back to Learn to Burn Part 2. So the previous episode, we were discussing the basics, the beginner-friendly way to get into burning wood. We were working on a flat slab of basswood that you could get from Hobby Lobby or even Amazon. You can order them, and was giving you my tips, things that I'm doing, and things that I have learned just in the few burns that I have put under my belt. And hopefully it was a little bit informative, but tonight's episode is how are you supposed to get it on cork. And if you have seen any of the videos about the cork burnings and stuff that I've done in the past, I have gone through a lot of trials and tribulations on trying to transfer patterns to cork, because cork is a whole completely different beast in itself. But I also wanted to take a minute and remind you guys, don't forget to use my discount code MARY10 to save you 10% as well. And if you need supplies like EVA or any courses on decorative wraps or supplies for some of the decorative wraps minus thread, then you can check it out at threadcentral.net. And if you are looking for some of the custom grips that I have kind of already put together, then go check out thedecorativestudio.com and also get you some cool t-shirts. Tonight, I picked a simpler design. I picked a rose, okay? I wanted something that was smaller, something that was going to be somewhat quicker and wasn't going to wrap too much, and hopefully would be able to be finished by the end of the video. I wanted it to kind of be beginner friendly. I started my wood burning, cork burning journey when the brook trout grip came into the picture. And I had always used carbon paper to transfer the designs, but for some reason, I can't get carbon paper to transfer to cork. It just will not work. I tried it multiple times. I talked to Mark Krause about it. He told me to take and print an image and then reverse it so that when you put it down on to the actual cork, you would take acetone or isopropyl and be able to rub the image off onto the cork. And I thought, cool, that'll solve a lot of problems. Well, apparently you have to have a certain kind of printer paper for that to work. I bought the cheapest stuff. I was told to get the cheapest stuff that I could find. I thought it was the cheapest stuff and went through 4 or 5 different trials, could not get it to transfer. I kept playing around. I was like, well, maybe permanent marker will bleed through it. No, I don't want to do that. I might not be able to take it off. Alcohol inks became how I transferred it for the brook trout. Now, the brook trout did not have any fine line details. It was a big pieces of stuff. It wasn't even like this rose is more complicated than that brook trout spots and stuff were, because I made it pretty big to fit the entire grip. So using the alcohol ink to bleed through to the picture to the cork worked, but I had really fat lines. I mean, alcohol ink just bleeds. So it worked, but it wasn't the best thing. And when I went to remove the alcohol ink after I burned everything, my entire cork grip turned black because I used black to transfer it. So I freaked out, but with enough acetone and elbow grease and multiple passes, I got all the stuff off. But problem with that also was that the alcohol ink got into the pits and all the characters that are in the cork. And so if I hadn't been able to paint that entire grip completely, I would have seen some tints of black on that. And I was like, there's got to be a better way to do this. And then I had to do the US Navy one, and that had a lot of fine details into it. So I knew I couldn't use the alcohol inks, and I knew I couldn't do the carbon paper, and I knew I couldn't use an acetone or isopropyl to put it on there. I did the next best thing that I could think of, and I used a fine line permanent marker. Permanent marker took forever to get it off. That one was fully colored. Tinge of black was not that bad because I had to paint over it regardless. But in came the next one after that, and I couldn't use the alcohol inks to transfer it. Couldn't cover the entire grip. So I had to come up with a way that was a better solution. And I had just recently gotten a tattoo. I thought, well, they use like a stencil that's blue, and it doesn't rub off when you wipe it. You know, cork is soft and kind of like our skin, because if you try to get a pencil to rub straight onto it, you know, your skin, you have to be there for a while to even get a tinge on it, right? So I thought, let's try some of that. So I went searching and looking to see what kind of stencils they use. And they use thermal paper. If you ever had a tattoo, you guys seen these stacks of paper that come out, and they have the pattern printed on this. This sheet is removed, and this is where the actual ink goes straight to your skin. And this is just a protective thing. I thought, all right, I'm not going to buy a thermal printer just to see if this works, because they're kind of expensive. And you know, if it didn't work, I was going to be in the hole for something I wasn't ever going to be able to use again, right? But even though this that I showed you says it's for a thermal machine, on the opposite side of it for the directions is the old school way of how they transferred the patterns. You would trace your pattern onto the main sheet, They would use a speed stick deodorant on your skin. Then they would stick it on there, and then voila, you have your pattern transferred. Cool, let's see what happens. And I was really excited about it. I was like, maybe I finally figured this out. I went through it. I was using Mudhole's logo because I was preparing for the advanced seminar. And it was right before I went to go pick up my boys. So I only had like 10 minutes, right? I got it drawn on there. I put the deodorant on the cork, and I stuck the thing down on there, and I pulled it off, and bam! It was on there, crisp and clean and so perfect. And I did a little celebration because I was like, I finally figured it out. Yay! And then I had to put it down and had to leave. And I'm glad that I put it down and I had to leave. When I got back, my fine lines, because cork doesn't absorb deodorant, apparently, had blown out and looked just like I had drawn with alcohol ink all over it. And to top it all off, the sections that I did try to burn, just to see what would happen, the burner, because you had to burn it on such a low temperature for the cork, was only burning the deodorant, so it smelled great, but it was not burning through to the cork. So when I went to wipe it off, I didn't even have any burn line, not even hints of a burn line on it. So I thought, okay, can use the deodorant. And I posted about this, and I had so many people. I've got 4 or 5 other products over there I got to try. That tattoo artist suggested to use. They were like, oh, the speed stick, that stuff's old stuff. Try this. It's great. I haven't had a chance to do it. So we're going to do it the way I figured it out for those classes. And it was not actually me, because I went through 3 or 4 different ways of trying to figure out how to get the thermal paper to transfer. And Wes comes bebopping in here. He sees I'm frustrated. He's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I don't know how to do this with a clean line. This isn't working. And he said, try heat. Well, it makes sense. It's thermal paper. You know, maybe the heat will transfer there. Why not? Let's see. So we just doodled something on there real quick, stuck it to the grip, grabbed a heat gun. I did the research for how hot a thermal printer gets. It's like 500 degrees, maybe a little bit hotter. My heat gun will go up to 500, so I cranked it up to 500, and I started doing the passes with the heat. When I lifted it, it hadn't transferred, so I thought, all right, maybe I need to push it in there. So I grabbed the CRB decal roller, and I started hammering it down. We heated it back up, hammered it back down, and it transferred. So I was like, all right, cool. I got it to transfer. Awesome. It burned great. When I went to remove the rest of the ink, this is where it gets kind of dicey and kind of scary. It does turn the grip blue. So in the grand scheme of things, this is definitely not the best way to do it, okay? Because we're going to have issues with getting all of that ink out, although it can be done. Even in the pits and stuff, you can use a Q-tip or anything with acetone and just pull that out. But it worked, and it was easy for me to quickly get the designs transferred, knowing going into it, because if I didn't know that it was going to just bleed out all over the place, I would have freaked out and been like, oh my gosh, Mary lied to me. But knowing that, just be prepared, okay? But if you're an artist and you don't have to trace something in order to burn it, then you can freehand with a pen, or I wouldn't recommend a pen because the pen will do the exact same thing. Ink will just go poof all over the place. But a pencil, you can actually just draw your design on there with a pencil, just straight to it. It works. All right, so let's get started, all right, because it's going to take a little bit for me to transfer it. So this pack came from Amazon, and it's literally just called Tattoo Transfer Paper. I don't know the brand. I just know that it came with directions for the thermal machine. If you have one, you can print it out, or the master sheets where you have to do it by hand. And when you get them, this is the side that we're going to take this image, we're going to place it under here, and we're going to trace it. But this piece right here protects the actual ink. Now, touching this, you're not going to get it on your hands. You can't rub it on yourself either. You can scratch it up and remove stuff, but you're not going to be able to transfer the ink onto yourself. You're just going to rip off little pieces, okay? So don't stress, like if you're touching this, it's not going to move until you add heat or you do anything else to it, okay? So I'm going to pick a spot where I haven't pulled some of that up, and we're going to set this under here. The rest of these are just fillers. The back side of this is what color the ink's going to be. Everybody calls it blue. It looks more purple to me. And then this is just a protective copy. We're just going to lay that in there real quick. And at this point, you're just going to start tracing your pattern and just periodically check to make sure that you're not missing any lines as you trace the pattern. I'm not going to add the shading into it. I'm just going to do the outlines of it. While you're tracing it, feel free. Like the shading or anything that you need to. I picked a flower because I wanted something that was going to be kind of small. I kept looking at fish. I kept looking at all kinds of stuff. And Wes can attest to this. I sat in here for about an hour and a half last night just looking through images that were going to be the easiest to burn. and not be too complicated, but something that would be quick and we'd be able to see like from beginning to end. And I just got fed up with all the fish because it was either like a solid, you're going to burn the whole thing, or it was too detailed. It was something that would take me a long time to do. So I just settled on this rose because I was like, there's a little bit of shading in here. We could do some fun stuff. That's shading. Where's that one go? It goes around. So we have a rose. Take our image out. And as we were tracing, we left our imprint on the paper that we need. So what happens is we don't use this piece, okay? We don't pick this piece up. This is what we're going to use. There's some pros and cons to shapes of your grips. Grips that have a whole lot of curves and a whole lot of dips and all this stuff. Those are going to be a lot harder to burn than, say, a cigar shape. But if you have to burn on something like the full wells, then consider making your pattern maybe just to fit into the curves. But if you can't, then you're going to have to do a whole lot of cutting of the paper to get it to lay down correctly. And painter's tape is your friend. Now, the other thing, I mentioned this in the last video. I don't like to put cork filler on this stuff. I tried it for a while because the idea is to be able to not deal with the crevices and the cracks and the divots and all that stuff with the cork. But when I did it, I didn't get all the cork filler off and it turned yellow when I went to burn. And I was like, that's ugly. So I just don't do it. I pick as best a piece of the cork as I can. This is actually the better side. There's not as many cracks and things to fight with here. So I would use this. If you wanted to try to fill all these little individual holes and cracks and stuff, by all means use the cork filler. It's going to help with a level burn more, but you got to make sure that you get all of it off or it's going to turn colors on you. All right, so at this point, this is where the ink is transferred to, okay? And you can see that we're touching it and nothing's happening. We're going to pick a spot to put this on there. The other thing too is, make sure that you guys size these things to your grips. You don't want to have a rose that is like from here to here and wraps so much that on this side the petals are running into each other. You want them to fit. Like I said, I just picked a little small one tonight. The other thing I liked about this was that even though the ink's on there and it's ready for me to transfer, I don't have to worry about it touching it. When I did the deodorant one, as soon as it touched it, it started to transfer. So that was rough, but we're going to get this on there. We're going to try to get it as straight as we can. And I'm going to use painter's tape. For some reason, all I have is this really big, thick stuff. It's really wide. And we are going to tape this down. You want to make sure that this doesn't move because we're going to really pound into it with that decal roller in a minute. So tape it in multiple spots so that you know that it's not going to wrinkle up and shift any of those colors. See, we've got a wrinkle here. I don't care what's happening back here. It can do whatever it wants to. I just care about the image. Obviously, if you were doing this for a customer, you would make sure that this is, equal space from top to bottom. It doesn't quite look like it's equal, but it's okay. The next fun thing is you're going to get your heat gun. And mine is a very dirty, but the Cobalt, I don't even know if they make this one anymore. I can change the temperature of this thing. I think the lowest it goes is 90, and I can go all the way up to 500. So we're going to crank the heat up. Fair warning, 500 degrees is really hot. Keep your fingers away from the heat, okay? If you're doing this, make sure that you either have a mandrel or your fingers are far enough away from it that this isn't going to burn you. Once we hit it for just a few seconds, you want to be really quick with this. And what we're doing is just smashing that color out of the paper into the grill. And you may have to heat it a couple times. So make sure when you place your tape that you have it to where you can lift it and see if it moved or not. And that didn't transfer at all. Sweet. Awesome. It was during this moment that I actually realized that I forgot a step when I was teaching this live video. So in order for this to work, you actually have to trace the pattern twice. Or, as my husband figured out the other night, the original that you had under that you were tracing picks the ink up as well, so you could take that instead of this tissue that we're using currently and use that to transfer the pattern. So don't forget to either trace it twice or to use the original image and tape that to your grip. So as you can see, my flower is starting to show. This is why you just lift it to see. We still have a little bit that needs to be pulled off on the top. So I'm going to hit it again with heat. And it's right up in here that really needs it. It's getting hot. Hot, 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 hot. Commentary's free. Enjoy the giggles and stupidity of Mary. Perfect. Now we have a transferred rose. So I'm going to keep my original copy right in front of me for reference of the shadows and things when we get there. Because this is a scrap one, I recommend to get a little spare one. I don't have it with me currently. So I just want to test how hot it is over here. And I want to go lighter than that. I don't want that to be quite so dark. I'm going to turn it down to 35 and wet the tip. I think 30. Yeah, we're going to run with 35. And then we just start burning. So remember, I like to use the shaders. That's my personal favorite. Use whichever tip you get used to and like to. And we are just going to follow our lines. Now, the thing with working on round objects is that you are going to have to stop and start. It looks like it's burning really dark, but remember, I'm also burning ink at the same time. Just keep that in mind. It's not burning any darker than, where's my scrap? This. It's just the ink is burning too. But when you're working on round, you're kind of moving blindsided on some sides because you're having to go around the grip. So you're going to have to stop and start a little bit more than if you were working on flat. So just be very mindful of how hot the tip is when you go to touch it again. So we're just going to burn the outline on here, and then I'm going to remove the ink because we don't need this on there any longer after that. Always keep your reference picture with you, because sometimes when you go to burn, you're like confused as to what that line is. And I always reference it before I start to do it. Now here we have a line that's running into that little crack. And we're going to put it down. And we're going to go up to that. The pits burn differently than the actual cork does. So barely touch the pit. Because I'll show you, this is a pretty bad one on this side. You get it in there, it will actually sink into it really, really fast. Mindful of the pits. Try not to keep your tool in there for too long. And some places the cork's going to burn differently than others. Some of it's softer. This is all that extra that I get from Cork for Us. I try to use it as much as I can. I would rather use the floor, but it's getting harder and harder to get your hands on. And cost is starting to get up there too. But this has worked out really well for the ones I've had in the past. And obviously, if you order a bunch of it, you can be a little bit more picky about what rings you glue together. And as I said before, you don't necessarily have to glue your rings together. You can just use the pre-shaped stuff if you want to. My hand is so shaky. And obviously, you can see that it's better to do this before you put it on the rod. Okay? It's a lot harder to burn and maneuver these things around when they're already on the rod, because now you can think about all the ways. I would be stabbing myself with the rod tip right now. So do this before you install it. We have our entire outline done. If you're just doing the outline, cool, you're finished. We're going to do a little bit of shading too. This part's going to freak you out. You want to get some acetone and some paper towels. And I do recommend to wear some gloves, but I forgot to grab mine, so it is what it is tonight. And we are going to take this ink off. Because one, we need the ink off of there because we can't leave it on there because you can kind of see some blue tint and everything. And two, sometimes, even though we've got these lines burned, we have to go back and burn them again because it didn't get all the way through to the cork. So I'm going to soak my paper towel. Depending on how much ink you had on there, depends on how much it turns blue. If you have a really big design, see where we're pushing, how it's blue. But the more that you constantly pulling the extra off, you won't turn your whole grip blue. So don't scrub with the same side of acetone the entire time, or you're just going to keep bleaching. See, this is from the previous one where I didn't get it out, and it'll just keep getting into those pits and stuff. Well, we got really lucky with this one. I want to get another paper towel and do it one more time. Just want to make sure all that ink is off. And we're good. This is the only line that didn't quite get burned, and that is this line. Make sure you also check the rest of the grip that you don't have streaks of blue down at the bottom, and you get it all off. On this side, I flooded the image too much with too much acetone, so there's a fine line of too much and too little, and I got the blue stuck in all these the little waves and cracks and crevices and stuff. Because I was doing it at, only had an hour, I quit, but that's just stuff to look out for. But on this side, it did just fine. Now we have a cute little rose. And at this point, it's just to go back, make sure that you got all of the lines burned, touch up anything that disappeared a little bit, it was disconnected, and start shading. So for instance, down here on this petal, and remember, we could have put all that into the stencil so that you wouldn't have to sit here and kind of guess where this stuff was going to be, but I kind of wanted to freehand some of this. And we got a lot of dark underneath this one. So I'm just going to make quick kind of movements so it's not touching it for very long, but I'm going to leave it at the same heat. And you can switch tips, you can do whatever you want to make it easier on you. And this is just bringing life to the flower at this point, okay? But if we had a silhouette, we would have to burn out the whole thing. And I didn't want to do that because I didn't want a completely black picture. And as you go through and you start adding the shading, you realize, okay, well, this didn't get burned, so now I got to fix that. It's like that is going here. This one was missed. Add that back in there so we can put our shading here. And you can see as we start to add all that, we start to bring depth to it with the shading. And I'm not going to sit here and bore you guys the entire time while I'm doing this, because I'll fret over it for a long time trying to make this look like a really good looking flower. Just remember, this is not the final thing that I'm going to sit on as far as being able to transfer it. But once this ink has been transferred to the cork, this is no longer able to be used. You have to redraw another one if you mess up. And the other kind of messy part of it is the fact that you do have to remove that blue ink. And if you're not super careful with it, you can turn your whole grip blue. With enough scrubbing and enough changing the paper towels with the acetone, you can get it to all go away. But it is definitely one of those things where the first couple of times that I tried it, I was fretting, okay? And then, like, as you can see on the one that I just quit on because I was just doing as a demo, I can still get the ink off of it. That's been since January that happened. So you're not going to hopefully leave a project sitting that long unless you're me and it's a personal thing you pick up. But the ink, you can still remove it with enough acetone and patience and changing the paper towels and stuff. Once you practice flat and you get the hang of how to do the burning, it's the same concept with the grips. It's just taking in consideration that we have to take the image and wrap it, so it has to fit. So a lot of it goes into the resizing of the image and making sure it's going to fit on there the way that you want it to, and it's not too big, it's not too small. And you may have to go through a couple of printouts of whatever image that you're going to be doing and just resizing it until you get it to the right size. But keep in mind, any of the like full wells or any of these other shapes that have, like, indentations and stuff of that nature, you're going to struggle to have something that's like, let's say, a puzzle pattern that fits in it perfectly because you've got the ups and downs. So you may have to lay down a stencil, but you may also have to freehand some of that stencil in order to get it to work out, because it's really hard to take something that's wider, shrink it down the middle, and have it lay like it's supposed to without you doing a whole lot of working with it, okay? I struggled with that when I was doing the basswood grip and had to burn the puzzle pieces all the way around it and have them connect. And it took me a while, but it's just erasing and redoing my lines and just making the best of it. It turned out pretty good. The only other thing I can say is, like, after this, once you burn it, like if you're just going to burn it, you can leave it, okay? You don't have to seal it. Sealing it or giving it like some sort of oil, like true oil, is really good, and doing some sort of something to protect it is going to bring the burn out more. It's going to show up more. But you don't have to go as far as putting like epoxy over it or a clear coat or anything of that nature. You still want it to feel like cork. We just want to enhance the cork with like a personal thing for the customer. Maybe you want to burn your logos on it, or, you know, burn a signature, or even little simple things like the dates that people have that they love, or whatever the case may be. It doesn't have to be an overly complicated picture. Doing a simple rose for somebody makes them overly happy at the end of the day. If you're going to paint it, obviously that has to be sealed. There is no ifs and buts around it. So if you go from here and then you decide that you're going to paint it, don't put the shadows on it. Just do the outline. Put the shadows on it with the paint. I learned that lesson. I put the shadows on thinking that the paint would be lighter and you'd be able to see through it. But the acrylic paint pens go on pretty non-clear. I can't remember that word, if it's opaque or whatever, but you can't really see through it. And I had to go back and I had to add my shading back on top of the paint, and that doesn't smell good. I don't recommend that. So if you're going to paint it, don't put your shadows in with the burn because you're just wasting your time. Do it with your painting. Even the lighter colors for that flag that I did, I thought tan, I'd be able to see it. And you could see a tiny bit of it, but it took away the shadows. So I had to go back and fix it. And like I said, don't recommend it. I don't think burning acrylic is actually very healthy for you, but you can't see the color come through that way. All right. If you find a different way to color them, it's not acrylic paint pens or watered down acrylic, then maybe if you do a like acrylic that's really thin, like where it's a watercolor look almost, you probably could do the shadows underneath of it because it would just be a hint of color going over top of it. But if you're trying to make it really bold and bright, don't put the shadows. Just burn the outline, paint it, put your shadows on with the paint, seal it. You can use the U40 cork sealer or the Cork for Us cork enhancer. Both of them passed saltwater and tap water, fresh water test, being sank for 3 days, and nothing happened to either one of them. So obviously you got to have the clientele for it, or you got to want to do it for yourself to start practicing and just offering just little things here and there. People want their name put on it. You know, we don't have to necessarily do a decal. We could offer to burn it on there. Letters aren't too bad. You know, it just make sure you get your stencil straight. And the other thing I recommend too is when you first do one of your first burns, I had mine on 35 volts for my machine and it burned somewhat dark. I would recommend you guys probably dropping it to 30 if you get my machine. Hold on, let's try it at, where did it stop? 25. Let's see what 25 does. If you're brand new to it, you're going to be really nervous. You're going to be really hesitant. You're going to be like, and shaking. My hands were shaking tonight too. But you want to burn the lightest that you can. You want to be able to see where you're burning, but you don't want to burn dark. And the reason why is because you would rather make multiple passes than make one pass and screw up. Because if you leave your grip just a tiny bit bigger, I mean, itty bitty, millimeters bigger, and you accidentally mess up with that really light burn, guess what? You left enough room for you to sand off your oops, and now it's to the size it's supposed to be, but the millimeter difference or 3, you wouldn't have really noticed at the end of the day. So my advice, leave it just a little bit bigger to be able to sand off your screw ups and burn lighter than I did. It's just going to work out better for you guys. So let's see what 25 volts does. Boop. All right, 25 is a little too light. We can't even tell what's going on with that. You always want to have some scrap piece of cork that you're willing to burn. Maybe you got one that's got like a lot of pits or something in it and you're like, that's a little too much character. Use it to test. This is what I recommend. So if you get the check 29 volts, you can see it, but it's really light. If I mess that up, I could sand that off and nobody's going to be any the wiser. This one is burned a lot darker, which in goal, we want it to be dark because we want to be able to see the image. We don't want to be, craning our eyes to see if that's a heart or not. You guys can't really see that. We want to be able to make multiple passes over it to get it to the darkness that we want, just in case we screw up. And you may even end up being a bigger fan of the lighter versus the darker. You're going to find your happy ground when you start to practice it. But multiple passes, you will eventually get to the same darkness. And then you can just fill it in. Boop. Now we have a very light burned heart. And once we got it situated, then crank your heat up. Just be really confident in tracing those lines. You know what I'm saying? Lighter burn, multiple passes, darker burn, you got one chance. Because if you get into these divots, even at 29 volts, these burn through so quick. So if you have to draw a line running from here to here, this burns, that burned through. Like I put a hole in it, like it was super hot. Let's find a new one. That's a small pit. If I was to drag it, still at 29 volts. You see how the line is really faint. When my tool gets in here, it gets stuck and it burns super dark, really, really fast. So the pits will burn different. And if you crank up the heat, like right here on this edge, I'm gonna have to be real careful about the rest of that flour because it's in that divot. Me personally, what I would do is come back in with a pencil and freehand a leaf to take up this hole. Just a couple leaves here, balance it out on this side because there's no real issues over that, and shade that mofo so you wouldn't be able to see it, and just poop, and then we don't have to worry about that ugly little pit. So that is how to burn on cork. That is my steps that I have come up with. As I've said before, that's not going to be the final thing that I land on. I'm continuously trying to test the easiest, quickest way to do this. If you can find that cheap printer paper, and I can't remember if it's supposed to be the inkjet or if it's the laser printer, but one of those two, you should be able to take acetone and soak it through the paper and get it to release as soon as it's printed. I've also watched, did not have any success with it, but I've also watched people that, you know, the sticker labels. I have some that I use for my shipments. They're just 2 stickers on one page, and each shipping label gets 2 to a page, right? And so I'm left with those blank, shiny, what's left of the paper. And you can print with an inkjet onto that paper and then take that image and whoosh, real quick down. Problem is you're blind, first off, because you don't know if you've got it straight or not, if your image is taking up the whole grip. And if you touch any of the ink, it smears. And if you accidentally shift it while you have it on there, it smears. So it's awful. And acetone's really hard to take it off. So I did try that with the flag. I went researching how they were doing the transfers of like photos to stuff, and I didn't have luck with it. So I settled on this. And so far this works the best. It has a little bit of a cleanup. And I am still on the hunt for any other way that we can transfer this stuff with a few less steps. Fumes from what, Diane? Burning. Oh, I think it depends on the kind of wood. Like, I know there is certain woods you definitely don't need to be burning without wearing face stuff. I don't think cork is an issue. I know basswood's not. But if you start going into exotic stuff of the wood family, always know the toxicity of each wood because they're all different. And I don't know about the burls. I would think that anything that has rubber mixed into it is probably going to cause dramas when you burn that because it is rubber. So I would highly suggest wearing a respirator or something of that nature and having a fan blowing the fumes away from you. But I don't think there's any dramas with cork. I'd have to actually look that up. Burning cork. When natural cork does burn, it does not release toxic smoke or gases. So there's your answer. It is perfectly safe to burn. I think that whoever you're ordering the cork from, like Steve Wan, for instance, or if you're going straight from Cork for Us, if you can talk to somebody about, is it cool to burn or do I need to know anything about this before you purchase it? I think that should be something that you would have a conversation with the vendor. Because like I said, I have only worked with the extra and floor. I have not worked with anything that has anything mixed into it. None of the stripes, none of the moonlights, moonbeams, whatever the other things are. Like, I've never worked with any of those. So even the ones that have like green put into them or red put into them, because it's not a fully natural cork, so I don't know how all that stuff got composited together. Plus, I didn't want the color for the background, so I can only speak in experience for that. Natural cork, good. Mixed corks, have a conversation with the vendor. Basically, just keep in mind when you're doing this stuff, it's a practice thing, and that's all it is to it. And at the end of the day, the tattoo stencils have worked the best. That pack of paper was only like 10 or 15 bucks. Like, it really was not expensive at all. And if I was going to ramp up and do these on the regular, like be doing one of these cork grips like once a week, it'd be well worth my time to invest in one of the thermal printers so that I don't have to constantly be tracing the stuff. I just literally have it print it out for me and then pull it, and then all I've got to do is transfer it and start burning. For somebody who's only going to be doing them every once in a while, didn't make sense for me to drop another $500 on a printer. And with cork, lower temperatures is your friend, making multiple passes is your friend, and experiment with it. But I don't recommend burning the burls, anything that's got rubber in it. Darker burls, obviously, it'd be no point. You wouldn't be able to see it anyways. So If you're going to plan to burn a grip, at least plan to have the lighter section in the middle and all your dark stuff on the edges. Or even if you're burning wood, if you start putting different wood pieces together, research the woods, make sure there's no toxic fumes that are going to come off of it, make sure cutting the wood's not toxic, make sure, check out your source. And the pre-shaped cork grips are going to be safe to burn too. I don't remember what exactly they're made of. They're not made out of floor, but they are made out of something that has less pits than this, and they have a lot of the cork filler filling the voids and stuff to make them look good. So if you really start digging into them to sand, you can break some of that apart, but they're going to burn better than if you made your own and didn't get all the cork filler removed. If you're really careful and you do get all that cork filler removed off of it, then you can get rid of all these pits and stuff into it, or you can keep the pits. If you decide that you want to paint it, you're going to need to seal it. You can use watered down acrylic or acrylic paint pens. You can go as light as you want to when you start mixing the colors together. Obviously, I have worked with folk art paint that's been watered down, and the paint pens that I've worked with, I know the ones that I use here are safe and not going to have to worry about salt water destroying it. Don't have to worry about tap water destroying it or fresh water destroying it, as long as it's sealed with cork sealer. And I use the U40 cork sealer or the Cork for Us cork enhancer. The U40, you shouldn't have to recoat it. It should be a one and done. The cork enhancer will have to be something that you or the customer would have to keep up with every 3 to 6 months, depending on how hard the rod is being fished. I chose to use the U40 cork sealer, so it was a one and done, less hassle for the customer. If you're not painting it, you don't have to seal it, but if you put some sort of oil or something to bring out the natural enhancement of the cork itself, it's just going to make that burn look 10 times better. You don't have to epoxy over it. You don't have to put a clear coat over it. You don't have to put anything over it if you don't want to. That's just going to be whether or not you want to do that. I hope you guys learned a few things. I hope some of this made sense. Maybe it takes the daunting idea of taking a burned image and putting it on something round and makes it make sense for you. I know that I was scared to death to do that initially, but it's become one of my favorite things to do between burning and painting, or just burning. I enjoy it thoroughly. It's a lot quicker than putting EVA grip sets together and images and inlays and stuff, and it is quick gratification because you see it happening, you see it coming to life as you're doing it. And a lot of the other things that I do is a hurry up and wait kind of situation. So I enjoy it. I like burning on cork. I like making cork grips. I like doing all that stuff. If you're liking the content on this channel so far, please like and subscribe. Every little bit of love just helps us continue to keep giving you guys the constant teaching of different things that we're doing and stuff that we know, and we love to share. We love to help others grow in their rod building journeys. And at the end of the day, we learn together, we grow together. And that's been one of those mantras that I have always just dived into and really completely endorse, like get behind. And by all means, try to find us on Facebook. Our rod building group is called the Southern Rod Builders, and that is where these live videos are coming from. And during these live videos, you see some of the questions popping up that I put on these videos for the final result, and that is just them being able to ask me in real time to answer those questions. I think live videos are great to be able to get that one-on-one kind of conversation going. Helping others is something that I really like to do, and I really like to watch other people grow. So if there's any content that you have questions about, things that you would like to see, things that you would love to learn, by all means, reach out to me at thedecorativestudio@gmail.com. I would love to get some feedback from you guys. I would love to be able to put content out there that helps you personally grow. And I really just love the ideas. And I look forward to the next video and the next challenge. And I hope you have a great day. Bye.